she honestly probably changed the rest of my life in that moment, because it was a situation where like she totally could have taken advantage of me because I didn't know anything.
I couldn't afford to go to school. I was surrounded by people that couldn't afford to go to school, but thought it was normal to take out $45,000 student loans. My dad owns an Italian sausage factory. I grew up around food. I thought I was going to be in food before I thought I was going to be in actuarial insurance calculations of statistics for insurance companies, right?
Okay, well, the leverage on this long term compared to like making $8.50 an hour is pretty incredible. So like I'm willing to eat ramen and risk it for now because my overhead is so low.
I need to raise my prices, and I'm like cringing at sending it, and I like triple the price, and they're like, oh, fine, thumbs up.
Yeah.
Like I probably could have been charging that in the first place.
And what I had to own inside of that was that I was agreeing to do the work.
That's you. One of my first clients paid me $500 to do a job that today would be $10,000. They went from $500 to offering me a $200,000 salary to move to New York City and build a kitchen studio of my dreams.
Hello and welcome to Second Order Change. I'm your host, Evan Borsier, and we're going to be hearing more from our guest, Mario Fabbri, in just a second. But first, I have to admit something embarrassing. I just recorded this whole intro, and I had the wrong audio device selected. I wasn't using my interface, and I was like, I nailed it. First take, let's go. And then I went back, and it sounded like garbage because it was using my iMac microphone. So we're back for the second one, and hopefully it works. And hopefully that's a reminder to you that you don't have to get everything perfect on the first try, man. Just take a rip at it. So I'm really excited for you to hear more about Mario. I learned from him in this conversation, learned things that I did not know. And I just stayed at his house like 2 weeks ago. I learned that he had this whole business in college that I was entirely unfamiliar with, whole parts of his journey to building his dream. And man, you talk about a dude who is really living the dream. Mario's on a whole nother level. So I'm very excited for you to hear from him. But before that, I want to just quickly talk about something that's been going on in my life recently. So as I am recording and releasing this, last night I went to the cinematography salon holiday party in Brooklyn, New York, and that was a lot of fun. It was very special to be back in a room like that. And if you're not familiar, I used to be in rooms like that a lot more often because I ran a Facebook community for filmmakers called the Super Secret Film Group. I ran a podcast called the Super Secret Film Cast, and I used to speak at panels around the country, and just do a lot of educational work in that space. And it's something I was really passionate about. I ended up getting very burnt out and taking a break from it. But it was fun to be back in that space, to see those faces, to see a lot of new people, and to see people that you haven't seen in a while. And if I'm being totally honest, one of the coolest things about going to an event like that is getting recognized and getting thanks and gratitude from people. Because so often it can feel like you're just throwing things out into the void these days. You know, you're putting something on social media, you're putting out a podcast, you don't know who's listening, you don't know if it matters. And so like I was in Nashville a few weeks ago, we were shooting some stuff with Mitch and went to a rental house, Contrast, shout out the guys at Contrast Visuals, went to pick up a Betacam, and I'm walking to the bathroom, and all of a sudden from behind me I hear, wait, you're Evan, right? And I'm like, yeah. And the guy's like, oh, I used to love your YouTube videos, that's how I got into filmmaking. And I don't know, maybe you're not supposed to admit this, but I admit this. It like that glows a special part of my soul. That's like the greatest compliment, the greatest thing that I could ever hear. And back when I was doing it more regularly, it was the thing that kept me going, was people saying, I finally quit my full-time day job and I've gone full-time as a filmmaker. I started my company, or, I've gotten a project going on here, whatever it was. But just seeing people find the courage and the awareness to take that next step is so fulfilling and so exciting. And so getting to go to something like this event and having people come up and be like, wait, I know you, is so cool, because the reason that I do any of this is, one, because I love it, but two, because I really have seen the impact it can have on other people's lives. And people creating stuff like this has had a massive impact on my life. It's opened doors for me. It's allowed me to go from a broke high school kid who knew nothing about anything to running Challenger, to building the opportunity for other people to live their dreams, to telling incredible stories with some of the coolest people in the world like Mario, who we're about to hear from. And I'm a big fan of passing that love along. So that's a big part of the reason why, going into January, we're going to be launching a new community. Now, base level things to cover in here. I am of the opinion that one of the most important things that you can do is have a community. Isolation is death. Isolation creatively is death. Isolation in your business is death. There's a great time and a place and a season for it. And there are aspects of it that you should totally engage with. But if you are totally isolated, you are stifling your growth in the long run. So one of the big things we want to facilitate is just connecting people more. And an example of that is like, even last night, having someone come up to me and say, hey, I just want to say that I really respect everything you're doing with Challenger, and I love where your head's at, and I love what you share, because I don't really think of you as an influencer, but you're definitely someone who like has original thoughts and shares them with the world, and I get a lot out of that. That encouragement and validation is so important. And some people say, oh, you don't need that. And it's like, sure, you don't need that, but it also doesn't hurt, right? So inside that community, we want to set up opportunities for training and education, things like the financial workshop we just did, to actually go through, hey, here's some advice, some insight from people who are a little further down the road. And that will include people other than me as well. And then inside of that, it's like, let's get opportunities to have other people share where they're at, to bring forward their position. And that could be part of a live Q&A where we go in and we break down where you're at, or it could be through the community forum where people are sharing, hey, here's a project that I just did, here's a breakdown of a budget, here's a proposal, and people can come in and connect with that and help get other eyes and healthy, growth-focused, constructive criticism and actual celebration. Like, hey, that's kick-ass, man. Like, that's some killer work. Congratulations on getting to that next level with your project. Congratulations on hitting your financial goals. Because a lot of times when you're isolated, you don't ever celebrate anything, and that's brutal. And so we want to create an opportunity for celebration and connection. We want to create an opportunity for education. We want to create an opportunity for inspiration where people can share stuff that they love, and for people to help expand outside of whatever their current bubble is to wherever they want to be. And so filmmaking is a big part of that. My background is in filmmaking. It's a big part of what we do, but we've expanded to be broader, right? We're getting involved in physical products now. We're getting involved in short form content. We're doing podcasts. And at the end of the day, most businesses now are sort of multimedia creative companies. And so whether you are running a production company or an agency or a freelance filmmaker, or you're wanting to build a board game company, like, there's a lot of principles here that we can talk about, both with finances and positioning and storytelling, that are going to apply to anyone. And so the core market there, I think who we're really going to be most able to help is people who are looking to build, I would say, small to medium-sized hybrid creative companies. So that's a big part of where Challenger is slotted in. And it's a little vague on purpose because there is so much room. And part of what I'm excited to do is help support people building their own custom, unique thing that really serves their market and what they care to do. So we're not being overly specific about that. But if you are like a DP or an editor, we're still going to talk about rates. We're going to talk about negotiating. We're going to talk about positioning and networking, and all of that stuff is going to apply to the freelancers and to the more like traditional entrepreneurs. So I'm really excited to get into that. I'm really excited to connect with you guys one-on-one more, and to bring some of these guests in also to do live Q&As. So that's a quick, long way of going around the block and saying that I'm really excited to be launching that new community. If you're interested in being a part of it, shoot me an email, message me on Instagram. It's going to be small, it's going to be exclusive, and we're going to be taking 12 months together. Like, that's going to be kind of the baseline commitment, because we don't want this to be in a flash in a pan. We want this to be something where a group of people go in together and make a really meaningful impact in their life and the life of everyone around them. And so that requires a few months of lessons, transparency, community, celebration, connection, networking. But I am so confident that we can make a massive difference in people's lives, because I've seen repeatedly my own experience. I'll go teach people negotiation for like half an hour, and they can go make $2,000 more on their next project, $5,000 more on their next project. And if you do that even just once a month for the rest of your life, it's a ton of money. And so we're going to have that opportunity to do that on a business level, on a community level, and to create this collective expansion, this collective creative expansion, financial expansion, courage expansion, and really bring a whole lot of beauty into the world, which I am very excited about. So that's my spiel. The last thing I'm going to say is this is just your quick reminder that you should hop on a free discovery call with Core and talk about your financial situation for 2025, because you might as well get your stuff in order, take your stuff to the next level. This is the perfect time to do it. You probably should put yourself on payroll. You probably should be having someone else do your bookkeeping for you. You should free up a lot of your time. You should have someone else doing tax projections and estimates so that you can focus on the stuff that you love to do. And if you love to do QuickBooks, knock yourself out, man. But like, if you don't, I don't. It's the first hire you should make, in my opinion. Before you hire an editor, before you hire an assistant or a gear manager, or honestly, probably even before you get an office, you should hire an accountant, in my opinion. So if you're at all taking this seriously, like if you want to make more than $50,000 next year, just hire Core. It's going to free you up. And it's going to be scary, because that's part of every one of these jumps is scary. When I had to make the jump to hire Core, I was scared. When I made the jump to buy my new car and I had to like write an $80,000 wire, that was scary. When we bought the Amira, that was scary. But that's the nature of taking big shots. And 2025 is the year of big shots, at least for us. And I would love to invite you to join us. So that's it. That's my spiel. Do what you want. I trust your judgment. But we're going to get right into it with the incredible Mario Fabbri.
I love my job because I feel like I get to help people live better lives doing something that I love, that is creative and risky at the same time. And I think the other part of it is you have this freedom to create, mold, and mend your own schedule and what that job is. So for context, my job is making cooking videos as content and helping other people do the same thing. And sometimes that means I'm working with some interesting food product that helps you grow your own sprouts at home. And I get to work with an eccentric entrepreneur who's filled with wisdom and has been a raw vegan for 20 years. And every time I talk to him, I just soak up some beautiful nugget of how I can live a better life myself. And I get to help him create an incredible brand and story out of that product to teach other people how easy it is for them to grow their own food. And then hopefully that message could carry on for generations. And to be able to be a part of that creative brainstorming, but product development process, it just feels like so inspiring in so many different ways. And that's one client. Then on the other hand, I am my own client. I produce content, I work with sponsors, and I create videos for brands all around vegan cooking. And the way I got to this place was I was the student before I became the teacher. And to be able to take that experience of being the student and learning from somebody like the guy I mentioned earlier who had the sprouting company, and to be able to say, hey, I've been working with these people for 10, 15 years. I've soaked up some nuggets. I think I could help other people eat healthier and make better food. And to be able to turn that into my own career, it's just kind of like a sharing of the life experience around eating healthy plant-based food, which is ultimately, I guess, what my job is.
That's incredible. Was that the goal when you were like a kid?
No, my goal when I was a kid was to become an astronaut, and then to become a basketball player and to become a hockey player all at the same time. So I would say, like, I always dreamed and believed that you could have an incredible career for yourself. And my parents always drove that home for me. But then slowly through like the fundamental education system, those dreams start to get chipped away. And teachers started to put me in a position where there was a course of action for me. And that course was not to become an astronaut, football player, hockey player, researcher. And when I got into high school, I remember I sat down with my guidance counselor. My guidance counselor was like, all right, so we're going to map out your entire future right now in this 20-minute meeting. And he asked me what I'm good at. And I told him I'm good at math. And he said, all right, so here are some of the top careers in mathematics. And I don't know why I was good at math. I never wanted to be good at math. I just was good at math. And my guidance counselor told me, you're good at math. here is one of the top careers for mathematicians. You should become an actuary. And I said, what is an actuary? And he said, an actuary calculates statistics to determine risk. And that to me sounded so uninteresting, and I also had no idea what it meant at the same time. And for those who don't know, what an actuary does, or a typical actuarial job, and I actually went to college for a year to become an actuary, and what that job was to be an actuary is, for example, you might work for an insurance company, and that insurance company, let's say they do car insurance. They have a bunch of people who need to get car insurance, and all these people fall into different demographics and different moments in their life, and essentially different data points. So an actuary will take all those data points and figure out what is the most effective way to make money and charge those people a certain price based on how frequently they cause accidents and how much it's going to cost the insurance company and how much they can charge these people for insurance, and how attractive that is to the buyers or the people to actually get it versus their competition. So it's all these data points. So basically, I'm like, as an actuary, I'd be like, all right, so we have a 25-year-old male who drives a $30,000 hybrid vehicle and has no crash history and lives in Los Angeles. How much should we charge them monthly for insurance so that we can make the most money, period? And that's what an actuary does. And that's what my dream became after I left my meeting with my guidance counselor. And all those other dreams just quickly went out the window.
That guidance counselor job is a kind of wild gig. Like, to just like take high school kids, ask them like one question and be like, this is what you should do with your life. And like I feel like the list that they're pulling from. So I was homeschooled my whole life, and so I never had this experience. But I think my mom talked about something similar where she was like, my guidance counselor said I should become like a helicopter pilot or something. And she's just like, I don't know where they get this stuff from, you know?
Yeah.
On the one hand, it seems like a very fun job, although I feel like it would be dangerous because I would just like be tempted to troll kids. I'm like, oh, you'd be a great crocodile wrangler, you know, or something. Like, just give them the most left field suggestions. But it is interesting, you know, you sort of mentioned it, that it's like, okay, so you start off with these big aspirations, and then you get sort of like brought down to earth in some ways by the system. Mm-hmm. And I've tended to feel like the system's just like, they're really not that aware of everything that is out there. You know, like that guidance counselor probably couldn't have even known that what you do now was a thing. Probably wasn't a thing then, first of all. But like, even if it was a thing, how aware are people of all those separate opportunities? So one, as you're hearing, like, actually you should be an actuary, what is that experience like for you? Are you very like, oh, okay, cool? Or are you like, I don't really want to, but I guess I gotta, like, what was the vibe?
Yeah, I think the vibe of being told I'm going to become an actuary and calculate statistics was kind of crushing, but it was also a plan. I think one of the things that maybe you experience is that with like a job where you're kind of making up what your job is, there isn't really a formula or a template for it. It could be like stressful, and when you're 18 to 24 years old and you don't like, at the time, like, I didn't know how I was going to pay for any of this stuff going to college. I didn't know where I was going to get money to buy a house one day, and to be able to say, you're going to be an actuary. An actuary starting salary is $70,000. A high salary for an actuary is $160,000. You're going to be on this guaranteed path to success as long as you achieve at a high percentile in your profession. And all you have to do that is be really good at following the formula. Not just the formula of life as an actuary, but the formula within the formula of literally being an actuary. Mm-hmm. For someone who is naturally math brained, I could actually resonate with that. I was like, okay, my life just got really easy because I just had to follow the steps. It got really boring. It got really unexciting, really uninteresting, but it got really easy. So I think, I don't know if you ever experienced this, and I look up to you as someone who is very successful at a filmmaking career, who has a very aspirational filmmaking career. And I have looked up to you in that way, like, since the moment we first spoke. Like, when did that happen? How quickly did you get from what am I doing to like, I'm making enough money to actually consider this like a legit job, and to be like, hey, high school guidance counselor, or hey, mom, you know, and I don't know what your mom's support level was for you, but hey, system, I'm making enough money to do this by myself.
Yeah. So for me, like, so when I was growing up, like I said, I was homeschooled, and my mom was super supportive. She was very like, go do what you want to do, chase your dreams. And so even like as I got into high school, our curriculum became looser and looser and more just like do stuff that's interesting to you. And so like that's where I got a copy of Photoshop when I was 16. I was learning web design. Like I was just experimenting with things. And wasn't making any money really. Started doing some projects here and there for like $50 and had some nightmare clients and was like, I don't really like this. My experience was that design, especially low-level design, is the first thing that everyone thinks that they know how to do better than the person they're hiring to do it. And so you just get wild notes all the time that don't make any sense. And so I was like, okay, I don't really want to do that. I ended up moving to Cape Cod, and I was like, interning at a church there doing music and media stuff and working just 2 normal minimum wage jobs. That was my like, okay, I just got to pay rent. I got to, you know, have my own place and start figuring this out. I never saw it as where I was going to stay, but it was like, this is what I got to do for now. And it was pretty quickly. I mean, I moved in September. I got a DSLR for Christmas in December, and I'd quit both of those jobs by January and was like, I'm just going to figure this out. And I've never had a W-2 outside of my own since then. So I was 18 and a half.
Wow.
But for me at the time, I mean, I think there's some sort of natural propensity there. You know, even just the thing that's like, I'm going to move out the day that I turn 18. I'm going to go figure this out. I've always been very prone to just like learning and asking people about things. And that carried me pretty hard early on. But I mean, inside of that, you know, so what I started to see was like, okay, I got paid like $100 to do a senior photo shoot or something. And it's like, okay, well, the leverage on this long term compared to like making $8.50 an hour is pretty incredible. So like, I'm willing to eat ramen and risk it for now because my overhead is so low. You know, I was paying like $50 a month to rent a place from a friend. Like it was, my overhead was non-existent. So it's just like, okay, I'm just going to eat ramen and make this happen. And just did everything I could get my hands on. Like I was doing friends photo shoots. I went to Haiti for 2 weeks with a nonprofit. I would go like film these camp recap videos because I'm like just out of high school at this point too. And so I'm like making things for $200, $500, $80, whatever it is. And then, you know, the main initial inflection point, I think this is all within the first year too, was I connected with a local photographer. I was just sort of interning with her and like helping her out on shoots, assisting, and she was letting me sort of like second shoot alongside her. And she called me one day and was like, hey, I have a couple who would like to do a video of their wedding. They don't have anyone. They have $200. Would you be interested in doing that? And it was like that weekend. And I was like, sure. So I like call my brother, who knows nothing at the time, now works with me and is incredible, but knew nothing. And I was like, hey, can you come down to the Cape and like second shoot for me? I spent like $250 renting a few things from Lens Pro to go. And I was like, we're just going to make this. I stayed up all night after the wedding. Like I did like a 15-hour edit session and just like burned through this thing. And I think it was objectively fine. Like it wasn't great. It was impressive for being like 18 or 19 and having no clue what you were doing and no real equipment. Like this is pre-gimbals, pre-drones. Like this is still old school. Like
what was your first DSLR? You mentioned you just got your first DSLR. What were you shooting on?
Canon T3Is.
Yeah, same.
Then they were bad. Like picture profiles bad. Kids don't know how good they got it now. That like an FX3 and an FX30 looks as good as it does. Like DSLRs were so bad.
Oh yeah, but you had to learn about lighting.
Yeah.
To make it look good.
100%. And so we put that wedding video out, and I ended up getting like another couple $100 tip from the couple, which I was amped about. I was like, you know, we're cooking now. And I get an email from Massachusetts Maritime Academy. and they're like, hey, we saw your wedding video. I found out after the fact that basically like the aunt of the bride worked in admissions or something, had like started the video, stopped it, called every girl who worked in admissions into her office, and they'd all watched it and cried for 15 minutes. And they were like, we need to hire this dude. Why that's the decision, again, in hindsight, I don't know. Like, I don't know that I would watch a wedding video and call someone to make Maritime Academy admissions videos. But so I got called into this office to meet this lady who's the head of marketing. And she honestly probably changed the rest of my life in that moment, because it was a situation where like she totally could have taken advantage of me because I didn't know anything. I was like shaking in my boots going there because I've never done any like real commercial stuff. Is so intimidating. I think I was 19 at the time. But I'd had my camera for like 6 or 7 months, you know? And, so she's talking about like, we want to do some of this stuff for Facebook and YouTube and, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I'm asking questions. She's like, so what do you charge? I was like, I'm going to be totally honest with you. Like, I'm pretty new to this and I'm not sure like what to charge at stuff like this. And that's where she could have said anything and I would have said yes. But what she said was, the last guy we had charged us $100 an hour and you're better than he was. Can we start there? And I was just like, sure. And so I walk out into the parking lot from this meeting. And that's the moment where I was like, dude, fuck any sort of day job forever. I'm figuring how to do this all the time. I'm a drug dealer now. I'm like stealing from everyone. This is insane. Because as a 19-year-old, like that's an insane amount of money.
Yeah, you said like $8 an hour to $100 an hour is insane.
It's nuclear.
I literally just dropped a blessing in your lap.
Right.
It took me years to have the confidence to charge $100 an hour, and it's worth that. But you just got drop a golden nugget.
Right. And that's why like the experience of that, and then getting to step into that and actually execute with resources on the line, you know, where it's like, okay, we have, you know, even at first it was like $1,000 or whatever to make something. It's like, okay, now we can like make something really good. I can get used to these kinds of conversations. That, you know, if that had come in and been some little like $15 an hour thing, it would have been different. It also would have made my financial situation harder. And that was like the one big client I had that year. I was still doing other stuff for free, doing stuff for $100, but like every few months I would go back to Mass Maritime and get a couple grand at a time. And we just kept pushing. And so like, then we had a project. They wanted us to do another thing around, they have this sort of orientation, sort of pseudo-military ceremony thing that they do. And at the same time, I was talking to another friend who had a fish market on the Cape, and it's like a local fish market. Yep. And basically we got each of them to give us $3,000, which at the time actually did feel like a lot of money. In hindsight, it's really not a ton of money. But like, so I brought my buddy Chris up, who I had met in Las Vegas. He was a cinematographer based out of Atlanta. He had done some like real commercial work and stuff. So I hired him, gave him most of the money, and we spent like 5 days shooting doubles where we'd like wake up at sunrise, go shoot fish market stuff, and then come home, crash, go back, shoot interviews with like Mass Maritime in the afternoon. And those two projects, once again, just sort of like blew the doors open to a new level of thing where we were able to execute on a really high level there. They came back and were like, we want you to do this at graduation. And we're like, okay. But like, we basically did it at cost. And like, okay, what if we give you $8,000? And then it's like, you're just taking steps now, you know, where it's like, you're going from making $400 a week to making $1,000 a day to here's $8,000 at a time. And at that point, I'm still 19 or 20, I think.
Wow.
And so it was just like, the doors really did keep opening as I just kept up and showing and executing. And, you know, I don't know, again, like, I think there's a lot of just like circumstance that comes into that like I did get given confidence. I think I had a lot of confidence, and just like being willing to own the place you have in the room. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things that I see with people that I talk to now is like, they just talk themselves out of everything. And I think the biggest thing that like 18 to 20-year-old me was good at was I didn't talk myself out of just about anything. It's like, okay, if you want to have a meeting, I'll have a meeting, and I might be shaken under the table, but like, I'm going to take that and we're going to go run with the ball. And, you know, it evolved from there. And so like that work that we did there was what led to like me starting to do stuff with Chris for ESPN. And then we did stuff for this watch company. And then it all just sort of spiraled out. And then we made enough stuff, at that time it was sort of like one man band production company hiring a few people. But we made enough stuff that looked good that then I started getting called to DP things, which at the time I didn't even know what that was. I'm like, what's a DP? What's big lights? Any of that sort of stuff. And then that set me on a trajectory where by the time I was like 24, 25, I was out in that like Apple, Walmart, Bose world, doing all sorts of stuff that I never thought was possible, owned an Ari Amira. So, I think it really is a combination of showing up and a whole bunch of circumstance, really.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, the journey is incredible. I want to back up to two things that every beginning filmmaker needs to know that you said. One is ramen and risk it. You gotta be willing to eat ramen and risk it. Like I ate boxes. You get a 50 pack of ramen from Costco using somebody else's Costco membership card. And that would live under my bed. And that is 50 meals. That is 3 meals a day. I used to be good at math. That's over 20 meals, right? It's less than 20 meals. 17 times 3 is 51. So again, you got to know ramen and risk. You got to be willing to eat ramen and just like risk betting on yourself. And then wedding videos. Wedding videos are a rite of passage for like every filmmaker. I remember I did a wedding video and it was like, you just learn through the process. They're so easy because no matter what, you're going to make something beautiful. Everybody there, the design, the outfits, the presentation, people's emotions, everything is just stunning. It makes it so easy to create something that just looks beautiful. You don't really have to do anything but film what the wedding planner put together. So I think wedding videos is one thing that like every beginning filmmaker should do, and a lot of them do, and it'll skyrocket your confidence. Learn how to do audio. You got to be able to record them during the speeches. That I remember that was a tricky thing for me, but everything is just stunning. It's easy.
Yeah, 100%. And I think one of the big things that like weddings and a lot of that work at that time did that has become like a lethal weapon for me is that ability to have that intersection of like intention and being able to like have perspective and art, but you're also just sort of riding the room, right? Like you have no control. Everything is just happening. And you have to develop that sixth sense of like, who's going to be looking where and who's going to react and who looks like they're going to cry and where should I be for that? And that's like this thing that you just, at first it's overwhelming. And then at some point it becomes autopilot. And like, I just think about that even when we were in Chicago this year, it's like, that's the whole vibe we're running on the whole time, right? It's like, you're just in it. There's no planning it. There's no knowing what's going to happen, but you have to have that sixth sense to feel it and still have the skill to go, okay, so where should the camera be? Where should I be? What's the movement? What's the composition? How am I subconsciously really on autopilot supporting the emotional narrative that's going on here right now? And weddings are a super valuable way to do that. The one caveat I would throw in there is that like, even when I was doing weddings, something that I was aware of was like, I don't want to get stuck here. Because I met people who were 40 and 50-year-old guys running wedding video companies who are like, I'd love to get out of it, but I have a wife and kids now, and yada yada.
I had a wedding.
Yeah, and it's like I need to use this as a stepping stone, but I'm always driving up. And that was something that just like I was very cognizant of early in the journey was like, okay, someone's going to give me $3,000. This is not the end game. Like we're just still reinvesting. We're still stepping up. I'm investing in getting to work with bigger teams. I'm getting to execute on a higher level. And I think that's something that, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to figure out your own like financial situation to make that even possible. Right. And I think that it depends. Like some people have family money. Some people have a partner that makes money. Like some people just don't have to worry about that. Some people really do. And like, yeah, if you have to eat ramen, do it. But I think also just like taking an honest assessment of your actual risk exposure is so valuable, because I find that a lot of people that I talk to, they like think it's so risky for some reason. But like when I actually look at the math a lot of the time, it's like, if you went and committed to this for 3 months, if you're not spending money like a crazy person on nonsense, if you're actually showing up and getting out there for it, like how many things do you actually have to clear just to break even? And it's usually not that much. And especially in the world we're in now, like where so much of this stuff is so ubiquitous, like you can just get opportunities all over the place. And yeah, maybe you eat it a little bit for the first month or two. I mean, I think my whole first year I made like $3,000, but again, I was just like entirely unconcerned about that. But like, you can get in the door pretty quickly. And even if you were just going around PAing, it's like PAs make like $250 a day at this point. Like, you do a few days of that a month, just to like give yourself a baseline, and you can make it happen. But especially if you're on the younger end of the spectrum, it's like the long-term opportunity of investing in that is huge. And like the reality, the other thing that I was very cognizant of was like, I had applied to Full Sail at one point and gotten approved, and it was like $100,000 to get a bachelor's degree in 2 years. And I was like, well, I'm just going to go like keep investing in myself and stay net neutral instead of going underwater. And I feel like that's another thing that like people get really worried about, like immediately getting into retirement accounts or having this big cash buffer. And like, you can build all of that in the process, but it's like just taking that first few years and realizing that most people in the country are underwater by a couple $100,000, that it's like you're really way ahead of the curve if you're even staying neutral. And then that's where you get to the point, you know, where things keep snowballing. And like for us, the goal for next year is to have our first $1 million year, which is crazy and something that I never thought was possible. But it's like, it does come from taking calculated risks. I never yeeted myself into the void and just like bought a $400,000 camera with no work to do with it or anything. But yeah, like the risk exposure, I think, is lower than people think. But they're just like, it's the biggest problem I find is that idea of like, well, I have to figure it out. I have to define it. I have to own what I'm doing and show up and tell people about it. And that is the hardest and the most satisfying part about it. Like, there's no playbook for this, really. Like, there's no anything other than going, what do you want your life to look like? Who would you like to work with? What would you want that to be? Do you want to be on camera? Do you want to be behind the camera? Do you want to be involved in the camera part at all? Or do you just want to be talking about ideas? Like, do you want to be super technical? Do you want to be, you can build anything these days. And that's where one of the other things that I think is critical there is just like getting as much different experience as you can. Cause I didn't know anything, you know, it's like, I just started making videos. I don't know what an AC is. I don't know what editors actually do. And so that was something I was really intentional about those first few years, was just like, I would go gaffer a buddy to learn from them, or I'd go hire a gaffer to learn from them, and just like seeing how different things work and the different opportunities, because, you know, the whole world of like being in the studio at ESPN is so different than working on a feature documentary, is so different than doing what you do on the day-to-day basis. Like, there's so many flavors of this. And I think most people have a relatively shallow slice of it that they perceive it all as being. And it's like, dude, there's an endless array of universes inside of this. And you probably would plug into somewhere really cool, but you have to go just wade into it.
Yeah, you got to try. Two things on this. Like, so one thing about filmmaking also, this is kind of a tangent, but this was like super helpful for me, and I think could be helpful for other people, is like, if you're just graduating college, or you're at a later tier in life where you don't know what you want your career to be, getting into filmmaking is one of the best things you could do, because the way I started out was I knew I wanted to be involved in some interesting, cool business. I didn't know what business. So I picked up a camera and started shooting for 50 to 100 different entrepreneurs just to see what their businesses were like.
Right.
I never intended to be a filmmaker. I honestly just like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. So I'm going to just try and get in the room and watch people do their jobs and see what actually appeals to me.
Right.
So I picked up a camera and just started shooting videos of brands, companies, food products, athletic wear, core power yoga. It kind of grows from there. And after a year, I shot like 50 to 100 videos, made almost no money, but I literally got an internship at like 20 different careers. Instead of picking a career and running with it, it's like, offer to make a video for that person's career just to get like a sneak peek at what their day is like.
Right.
What the day is like. Like that was thinking back, I forgot, but like that's why I actually started making videos. Was I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to work at a startup company. I didn't know which one. I had a camera. My friend offered me $100 to make a video for a startup company. I was like, oh, this is how I could figure out where I want to fit in to my next career. And
so
then
where did this fit in? Because you somehow flipped the tables on me and we lost the track of your story. But so you went to become an actuary for a year and then somehow pivoted from that into this video. What happened in the middle there? Or was that like at the same time?
It was very similar. So I went to University of Colorado to snowboard. And I was also trying to become an actuary. That's what I was supposed to be doing. And after a year at the University of Colorado, I got faced with this. You have to take out a $45,000 student loan if you want to go here next year. And I thought to myself, what am I actually going here for? And what am I learning from it? And it just didn't make sense for me to take out a $45,000 student loan. It's an insane thing. And at the time, so there's a couple of, I'm trying to think of like how to make this a little bit more concise. So really short little tangent story. At the University of Colorado, didn't take out a student loan, need to figure my shit out. And I started working on a startup business called Tuition Specialists. And at Tuition Specialists, we helped out-of-state students become eligible for in-state tuition. I was one of those people. I was going to have to pay $30,000 a year for out-of-state tuition at the University of Colorado. And me and the people I was working with found out that every university has a process with which you can become eligible for in-state tuition. Every university is different. It's based on state laws and their interpretation of those laws. But we found that the University of Colorado has one of the easiest processes to get in-state tuition. And in-state tuition is $20,000 cheaper per year than out-of-state tuition at the time. So I was like, if I want to go to this school anymore, I need to get in-state tuition. And to do that, you have to spend an entire year becoming financially emancipated, becoming a resident of the state of Colorado, this whole like long checklist of things. And we found out that a lot of other people want to do this too. So we figured out what the checklist is. The school isn't very transparent about it. And we put together this entire process to help people get in-state tuition. So we started this business called Tuition Specialists where we were helping out-of-state students become eligible for in-state tuition. I dropped out of college to pursue that. Coincidentally, right at the time I got in-state tuition, it was like, oh, this is a legitimate business. I'm going to drop out of school, even though I just got in-state tuition, and run with this business. And for the next 3 or 4 years, me and some people, we built a company called Tuition Specialists. And it was my first taste at entrepreneurship and also for-purpose business, because our mission was to help make college education accessible for people. I couldn't afford to go to school. I was surrounded by people that couldn't afford to go to school, but thought it was normal to take out $45,000 student loans. And I saw and knew people who had taken out those loans. Years had gone by. They're older now, and they're still paying $900 a month payments on their student loans. And they can't move into a new house. They're not even using the degree that they got for the career that they're in. So it just seemed absurd to me. So we started this business, Tuition Specialists. It was pretty successful. We did really well for about 4 years. And then the University of Colorado changed their in-state tuition policy and made it nearly impossible for people to get in-state tuition.
They locked you out.
On the spot. Put us out. And we were crushing it, man. We were they put us out because they weren't making as much money. Their books were down. They're like, how are all these people getting in-state tuition? They found out and they shut it down.
What were you guys charging for that?
So we were charging based on success. We would get 10% of the out-of-state tuition cost for every semester they were paying in-state tuition. So the process takes a year. So here's the numbers. So we find somebody who is about to be a freshman, and we start working with them. And we work with them for an entire year. And then sophomore year, they get in-state tuition, and they go from paying $30,000 to $10,000 for that year. And we charge 10% of that $30,000. So we get $3,000 for their sophomore year, then $3,000 for their junior, and $3,000 for their senior year. So the ideal client, we're making $9,000 off of them. And we work with them for just that first year, because once you get it, you don't have to continue to prove it. So $9,000, and I think in the first year, we ended up getting, 100 clients. Eventually we got 300 the following year, and we ended up helping about 1,000 people get in-state tuition. So it was a pretty lucrative business model. We were doing really well. We were making money. We were making a difference in these people's lives. And then all of a sudden it just got shut down. And then from there,
you talk about just big early jumps though. You drop out and what, 100 people, you're clearing 300K sort of year one of revenue at that point. Like that's not nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was great. I wasn't really seeing much of it because we were just investing in systems. Like we were building our own client management system. So we hired a designer, and it was a lot more expensive to make websites at the time. And we were growing our team because we needed specialists to actually help people go through the process. And we were executing on creating a playbook for the process. It was just, it was amazing. Like, I look back on that, and that was like definitely some of the best inspirational moments at the beginning of like starting my career.
I want to pause real quick on something there, because you bring up something implicitly in this that I used to feel bad about this part of my story, honestly, because I would meet so many people who like dreamed of being filmmakers. They like grew up wanting to be a director or whatever.
Yeah.
I did not. Like it was not at all even on my radar. I liked like early YouTube content. I liked watching movies. I remember I really liked the extended edition of The Lord of the Rings. Just like the behind the scenes process of that kind of stuff felt really cool and creative to me from an art perspective. But like I was not someone who was like obsessed with any of this. And I had been interested in photography, and like it really fell into my lap where like I made something personal at camp, which led to me getting asked to edit something for our church for Christmas. And that's why I got a camera for Christmas, because my mom was like, oh, you should do more of that. And then it was just sort of off to the races, right? And then it was like, okay, I have this tool, I have this skill. How can I help the people around me with this tool and this skill? And I think that's one of the big things for me too, that's just like you bring up, we're helping people actually solve their situation. Starting from the position of like, how does what I'm doing actually serve people? How can I serve people where I am? Because that's what it was, whether it was like senior photos or that first wedding or mass maritime. It's like, you're just finding new ways to serve people. But I feel like it's easy to get into this big like theory crafting, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go thing? And I think there's a time and a place for that for sure. But like, it was just funny listening to you where it's like, I wasn't trying to start a tuition business. I was just trying to go to school. And the next thing you know, you have this like $500,000, $1 million an opportunity on your hand because you showed up and you figured it out. And it's like, you're not a web designer. You're not a customer management expert. You're just there solving the thing and like taking the next right step. And for me, that's such a powerful pattern. Like once you learn that lesson, that is like, oh, I didn't have to be anything other than willing to show up for this thing and like ask the right questions and facilitate. And there's a lot of value there that like, then you start seeing those opportunities everywhere. Have you seen Free Guy, that Ryan Reynolds movie?
No, I have not.
There's a moment in that. It's like the conceit is that he's like a character in a video game who's like an NPC that like wakes up and realizes it's a video game. But it's interesting because it's kind of similar metaphor where it's like, the day that he sort of goes like, oh, it's a game. And he had been living in a world where like everyone's just on autopilot, right? And then he like puts the glasses on and he can see all the quest markers and like help this old lady cross the street, get bonus XP, do this thing, get this money. And I really think it is like an awareness thing that you just start to see like, oh, that's a problem that can be solved, that people need help with, that saves them $20,000 a year. If I can help make that easier, there's a world where I get a cut of that and like I get to have fun and help them. And like that's all any of us are really doing. And as that continues to go on, you take that lesson and go into new places. But instead of looking so far into the like distant future of like, oh, I have to go move to LA or whatever, like maybe that happens. It's like there are opportunities right around you all the time to do stuff. And like for me, that was helping random little local businesses like the fish market. But like for you, it's tuition, but just like that ability to see an opportunity and just be the person who steps up and actually does something about it is such a powerful tool.
Yeah. I have this like kind of concept of how you can create a career doing something that you love. And it's based on college, but for yourself. So college is 4 years. So this is a 4-year plan for starting a career doing something that you love. Year one is you have that thing that you love, just learn how to do it. Practice it as much as possible. Watch YouTube videos, get out and do it. Let's say you love woodworking, right? Start getting familiar with what types of saw blades you need. Get familiar with the material. Start building your first little birdhouse or something. And start creating and being an artist. So year 1 is just the creation year. And then year 2 is create with as many people as you possibly can. Build your network, build your community. So you're a woodworker, work on a collaborative birdhouse with somebody. Your neighbor needs to fix their fence. Fix the fence for your neighbor just to understand how to actually put together a wood fence. Your local baseball team is in the championship. Build them a plaque and just gift it to them and have them come in and do some input on it. Work with a painter. You make the wood, they do the painting. Year 2, you are working with as many people as possible just for fun. And then year 3, you are doing free work for businesses that you see potential to become clients. So year 3, you are doing as much woodwork with businesses that you love and dream to be within. This secret sauce to this is when you're willing to and offering to do something for free, you can work with clients that you'd never be able to reach on a client basis, because they're not going to hire you. But if you go up to, the president of some charity that you think is absolutely incredible, and they're a huge charity and they're working on cancer research, and you're like, hey, I want to build this breast cancer awareness plaque just for you guys to have in your office. If you came to him and said, hey, I want you to hire me to do this, this is how much I charge, he might say, no way. If you come to him and you say, hey, I just want to make something incredible because this is a cause that I believe in, that person's going to open their doors to you, give you feedback, experience who you are as a hard worker, and you're going to build a relationship with them. So backing up, year 1 is learn the skill as much as possible. Year 2 is collaborate with as many people as possible. Year 3 is collaborate intentionally with businesses that you see an opportunity to work with, and then start to maybe charge a little bit of money. And then year 4 is profit. You have worked with 20 to 50 businesses in year 3 that you saw as opportunistic companies. And if you do great work for those businesses for free, in year 4, they're going to come to you and say, hey, can you do that again? And then you're going to say, hey, I actually just established a business. This is how much I charge. And that company, that corporation, that business, that collaboration is going to be so impressed by your work that they're going to pay you what you ask for. So whether it just appears out of nowhere or through hard work, I think that instead of going to college, follow that 4-year plan. It's the same length as college. It doesn't cost you anything, and you're going to walk out of it profitable. But you have to be willing to spend 2 to 3 years sometimes not making money at a high level. And you might feel like you're losing, but just trust me, some of my biggest clients to this day, all the time, are people that I went to because I loved, and they were startup businesses, and they said, hey, I love what you're doing, but like I only have like 0 budget. And I'm like, hey, I believe in you. I want to make this for you.
Yeah.
Because deep down, I believe that they're going to start making enough money to pay me to do this.
Right.
And they have. I've turned clients that paid me $100 into $100,000 clients. One of my first clients paid me $500 to do a job that today would be $10,000. They went from $500 to offering me a $200,000 salary to move to New York City and build a kitchen studio of my dreams. Like, start by being able to identify opportunities and then do them for free with people who will pay you later.
Yeah. I love that. The 2 things that I'll add to that are be willing to do it for 4 years.
Yeah.
Don't drag it out if it goes faster. Like I find that a lot of times it's like having that long-term time horizon. When I, a few years ago, went through a big like fitness health journey, the biggest thing that changed for me was I'm going to do this for 2 years. Like I want to see what my body looks like 2 summers from now. And I think that's like a lethal mindset change, to actually play a long game of like, I'm going to do this for 4 years. And it's going to depend on personal aptitude and all of that. Like I pick things up deadly fast. And so like, that's where for me, like I was able to sort of speed run that first 3 years in a lot of ways. And like, there are opportunities that can come along inside of that. Maybe you're still learning, but you're like doing something, you're PAing while you're learning to shoot stuff, or you're finding some way to still be in that space. And like, I think that all is super valuable. But yeah, overall that trajectory is super great. And 2, the other thing that's just like important, I think, is to be aware. I think most people are not aware of just how big the potential upside is. Like, it's like, oh, I'm going to risk it, and then I'm going to get paid $500 to work all day to make some crappy thing that I don't care about. And it's like, the world is much bigger than you realize. Like, I continue to get floored by realizations like this. Like, from that first day where it was like, oh, here, we're going to give you $100 an hour. And you're like, that's crazy. It's like, we did a project 2 years ago that was like a relatively low budget story that we really cared about. We made a documentary it was like a half-hour mini doc for like $8,000 and had to go to Minneapolis, and wasn't a huge take home, but just like cared about it. And long story short, that led to a relationship, which this year led to a client in the span of like 3 months giving us like $75,000. And so, yeah, it's like, you have to realize that that's the leverage that you're fighting for in the long run, I think. Like, the leverage is not to make 30 to 50 grand a year still and be a starving artist. The leverage is that, like, if you actually learn how to show up and serve the same way that you as a 19-year-old can find a $300,000 opportunity, like, the opportunities out there are so much bigger than most people are aware of. And it's really dependent on that period, though, where you learn how to fail, you learn how to learn, you learn how to ask questions, you learn how to execute, you learn how to maintain integrity. Because one thing that I've seen a lot of people struggle with is they get squirrely when the numbers get bigger. And at the end of the day, it's all the same game. The numbers just get bigger. But like, you have to learn how to be confident in your perspective, how to manage, that balancing point of like your own expertise and your own perspective and interacting with someone else. But as you continue to do that, those doors just keep getting bigger. And they are often the weirdest things. Like during COVID, we had an opportunity. I got a call from this company that was like, we need to do driver training for all our drivers. This company, that waste and recycling company that had like 500 employees. And I was like, okay, sounds cool. Like, do you have a budget? And they were like, no, we just like, it's important and we just want to get going and just bill us at the end of each month. So I was like, okay. And this was like, my calendar had just gotten cleared. I had been coming from shooting like big commercial stuff, and I wasn't expecting it to be big commercial money, but I was like, it's got to be decent. It was always a little nerve-wracking, though. Like, I don't love when people are like, we don't have a budget, because I'm like, you don't have a budget until I send you a bill that's double what you expected, and then you're going to be pissed, But long story short, that ended up becoming, I never fully audited it. I want to say that it was like a $250,000 project that year. And that was a connection. That was a guy I met through our gym. We had been doing videos for the gym during quarantine because I had nothing else to do, and was like, I'm just going to help the gym. Like, I was obsessed with training at that point. And so he reached out and was like, hey, you should come do some stuff with us. And next thing I knew, it's like, oh, here's a $250,000 opportunity on this one project. And like, again, it's like the put the goggles in and you start to see it thing. Like, those opportunities are really all over the place. But most people, I find, are so in their loop, whether it's like in the loop of just trying to like make rent that month, or in the loop of scrolling, or in the loop of being happy, being miserable, that it's like, as you start to take those beginning steps to develop skills and relationships and engage and like get yourself out of survival mode, you start to realize all these opportunities and realize there's so many other cool people I can bring in to actually help with these opportunities too. Like, I get to now see this thing and bring Mario in to help with it, or bring, whoever, my brother, in to help with it. Now I get to pay them to do something that they love. And like, I don't know, that's one of my favorite things about any of this work, is like getting to work for people you love, on things you care about, and to like do it in a way that sets people up for success, that compensates people well, that respects people, because there is so much just like shitty behavior out in the world. There are a lot of bad bosses. That like, one of my favorite opportunities is the opportunity to be a good boss, especially to creative people, because creative people just love to get shafted. It's like they're gluttons for punishment.
Oh yeah, we love to talk ourselves out of any form of confidence and appreciation for our hard work.
Yeah.
Effort.
Okay, so that brings me to one thing that's just like, I say this all the time, and I need to remind everyone, because it's the most important single lesson I think I can tell anyone in this world is, do not negotiate against yourself. If someone calls and asks you for a number, give them a number and shut the fuck up. And if they have to negotiate, then you can negotiate, and there's a whole skill, and we can talk about that separately. But like, the number of people who are still like high level professionals who I will call for projects and be like, hey, what do you charge? And they'll be like, oh, it's $1,500, but I'm flexible. And I'm like, all that you're doing is guaranteeing that no one's paying you $1,500. Like, if you could just stop that, the couple $100 per project that you're hemorrhaging at the end of the year would be significant. And like that habit alone is just, it's not serving anyone. Just say the thing. And if the other person wants to negotiate, they will, but do not negotiate against yourself.
I wish I had heard that sooner. The amount of times I said, I'm flexible is like, I'm just like cringing, like at sending this thing. And I'm like, oh, I'm flexible. And then I'm just like, all right, it's cool. You know, whatever happens. I'm like, I think one place that I think is important to get to, and this is just kind of more the like business stuff, and it seems like you're there, is when you have stuff going for you, it just goes. Momentum builds. Mm-hmm. If you don't need the job to buy that box of ramen to eat for the next week, then you could raise your prices and you could be okay with them saying no.
Right.
But if you're like, I need this job to pay rent, you will charge a tenth of what they're willing to pay out of fear of losing the opportunity.
Right.
And I've been there, like,
right.
I've had people where I'm like, I need the job, I'll charge it $500, and then a year later I'm like, hey, I'm so sorry, but I need to raise my prices, and I'm like cringing at sending it, and I like triple the price. And they're like, oh, fine, thumbs up. Like,
yeah.
I probably could have been charging that in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that's a funny like uncomfortable lesson that I learned relatively early, is like anytime you say a number and they just say fine, it's like, fuck, I went too low. You know, like if they don't think about it, you're way undershooting there. But it's an uncomfortable place for a lot of us. It's like another skill that I feel like we aren't taught, even like I wasn't taught. And like there's an emotional aspect of that. There's a like owning your value. There's, you know, I think the insecurity. Yeah. And like just sitting in that is such a powerful thing. And then the conversation can continue at the end of the day. Like they're not going to bite your head off. Hopefully they might say like, oh no, we can't do that. What else can we do? And like, if that happens, one other key thing, if they're going to do takeaways, have takeaways on what you're delivering. Because the other big trap that I got into really early on was saying like, oh, we need $10,000. And they're like, okay, well, we have $5,000. I'm like, okay, fine, we'll do it for $5,000. And it's like just shifting the perspective of here's what we can do for $10,000. And they say $5,000. And you go, okay, well, here's what we can do for $5,000. But continually delivering way above and beyond, and just letting people, because then you also set the precedent that the price is arbitrary, right? It's like you can just make it whatever you want. And if they came in, if you walk into Starbucks and they were like, so, you know, a Frappuccino is $6. I'm like, well, I have $3. And I'm like, okay, fine. Then it's like, okay, I guess I'm just going to play this game forever. Like you're just conditioning people to jack with you at that point. And this has a weird way of fitting into, you know, that bigger picture of at first you're doing things that are favors more often. And that is an important part. But like, as you're stepping into the growth, there are these layers where you start having to go, okay, I have to own that I have a rate, and what is that rate? And that rate probably should get raised more often than it does, is another like potentially controversial take I have. When I was coming up, a lot of people would like in January, they'd raise their rates. And my personal opinion is every time a client agrees to a new rate, that becomes the new set point. And then we start testing higher set points above that. And so we would just like ratchet it constantly. And it's like, okay, someone gave us 500. Now the next person, we're going to quote 1,000. That they said no, they said no, they said yes. Well, now we get to go, okay, set points 1,000. Like you just start jumping those numbers real quick. And that's another way that you get exponential growth, instead of sitting in this world where you're like waiting to the end of each year to raise your rate $50 or something.
That's helpful for me right now. I'm like, I'm in that dance with a client right now. And I'm like, today I have to send an email. Like we raised our rates. And I was waiting until January. I was like, it's the new year. Raise our rates, new president, inflation, you know, just trying to come up with a couple of an excuse to do it. Because at the end of the day, it's a company that I love, that I don't want to lose just emotionally, you know. But those takeaways, I need to implement those takeaways. I need to see what the next new threshold is. So that's super helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the big things there is that like, one, back to the sort of like emotional and conditioning side of it, it's funny that there's this implicit sense that you need to like justify it, right? That it's like, oh, well, my hard costs are going up, so that's why my rate's going up. Or, oh, like rent's more expensive. Like we often feel like there's this need to have a story behind why the thing is changing. And it's like, the reality is you're better, you have more impact, you have more experience, you're more efficient and effective at what you do, and they have more relationship with you. So there's more value in continuing to work together, because if they were to go to someone new, they're going to have to develop a whole new relationship. They're going to have to start from scratch. They're going to have to get someone in line with all their stuff. And like, that doesn't mean that you have to be abusive of that relationship, but like, you don't need to justify it as anything else either. It's like, hey, the value of what we're doing here is going up. You're not a hyper scalable business. You know, you're not like a gym membership. Like, you are the core product of what you're delivering. Your time comes at a premium. Those relationships come at a premium, and you have the ability to make multi-$100,000, $1 million impacts in businesses. And so like, you have to be intentional about who you're working with and making sure that you're advocating for yourself and the people around you, that you're getting a share of that pie, and hopefully they're getting way more pie. And that's part of the reason this whole relationship exists. But like, at the end of the day, the more home runs you hit, it's like, you do have to sort of show up and say, you know, and here's my cut for hitting home runs. And to be willing to do that and not feel bad about it and not be ashamed about it. And I do find there's often this element, like, it's one of the funniest things, because again, I feel like it's like a socially, at least for the way I've grown up and like been in the world, it's a socially looked down upon thing. But there's a ton of power in actually calling people's bluff, and like, you have to know when to do it. But I've had a few clients like that over the years, where like, people are just, they're trying to draw the line in the sand. It's like, no, we definitely can't do that. And actually, the client that I was talking about, who we met this year and ended up doing a decent amount of work with, the first project we got brought in on, they had been using like sort of a one-man band vendor in the past. They were wanting to step something up, but didn't want to spend big agency money. And so they were like familiar with my work, and they were like, hey, we want to bring you in to like direct this other thing that's going on. I was like, okay, first of all, that's not actually going to change a whole lot of anything. Like, if you want to actually do this better, we have to fundamentally do it differently. We're working with real talent. They were just trying to like cut corners everywhere, where they're like, oh, what if instead of hiring crew, we just like fly one of our photographers out there to set lights up for you? And I was like, no, we're not doing that. We had a few conversations. I sent him a quote, and it was an aggressive quote, because I was in that place of like, I feel like we need to push this scope, but like, it's still pretty tight. And so the quote I sent them was 24.5, and they replied and were like, hey, we really need to get this to 15. And I was like, totally get it. And they were like, let me go see. There was some like back and forth there, where they're like, oh, let me go see if I can push that. And then they came back and they're like, no, we really need to get it under 15. And I was like, look, I totally get it. Based on all the conversations we've had, I'm not confident that that's going to go well. And if we're going to do this, I really want it to go well. If you need to go in another direction, I totally get it. And then I don't often do this, and I don't know that I would recommend this, but I actually sent like, just as a reference point, a project like this should probably be more like 35. Here's how I got to 24.5 and like why there aren't any more corners to cut. And here's why 15 is just impossible. And it was like kind of a little book of an email. And it was one of those things where I really was just willing to walk, but I was like, here's where we're at. Mm-hmm. And the reply I got the next morning was, we can make 35 work. And it's like, okay, what a fucking bullshit play you guys had out here, right? Like, I was almost, you know, there's that party that's like, oh, they definitely can't do 24. Really need to make 15 work. I had a similar conversation with a record label earlier this year. We were talking about a project, and the musician's a friend of mine, but there was this label guy involved whose like whole job is to run interference and be annoying, to be honest. But he's like, okay, so like, what's the budget? And I was like, well, first of all, I don't know what we're doing. We're talking about a project that's going to go from like March to August. And like right now we're just trying to film like a half day of doc stuff while I'm in town. So I don't know. If you want me to make up an arbitrary made up budget, I can, but it's not going to be real or connected to anything. And he was like, okay, well, as long as we stay under, I think he originally was like, as long as we stay under $5,000. And I was like, okay, just to be clear, like based off what we've talked about, I don't see any world where like that's happening. And so like, if that's a problem, let's just flag it now. And then like goes through and he's like, actually, you know, I think we can push it to $10,000. And then like there was a few more conversations and he's like, okay, as long as we don't go over 20 grand. And I'm just like, this is the stupidest thing. And it's like, it kind of is, but it is a game that you have to learn to play, because the reality is it's getting played on you, like whether you like it or not. And I am really grateful to work with a lot of people who we are just like very transparent about things and that I have a lot of trust with. But even getting to that point, like sometimes getting to that really trusting point requires you walking through calling people's bluffs a few times. And so like since that first conversation, you know, with the, okay, we can do 35 thing, that client has not questioned a single quote we've sent them since then. And like, they love us and trust us, and you get through that thing. But like something that I learned the hard way in the first few years of my career was I had started developing some resentments to some of the clients that I was working with because I felt like I wasn't being properly compensated. And what I had to own inside of that was that I was agreeing to do the work.
That's you. That's
Yeah.
not, yeah. You have to have that like radical accountability.
Right.
But I felt that way. So I'm like, I agreed to this. And I'm complaining. And it's way easier to see it when somebody else is doing it than when you're doing it.
Yeah.
But you know, sometimes you'll have that friend where every time they talk to you, they're frustrated about this thing. And in your head, you're like, you agreed to this.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm sorry, but it's on you.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's where just like sometimes having community for those things too, to actually just bounce things off of people, like whether it's a contract or a scope or a rate, just being like, hey, how do you feel about this? Because the reality is you can say no to things. You will be okay. Like it's a hard lesson to learn. And it's a lesson that I find I have to come back to every few years. It's like you hit a new level of like, okay, I got to start saying no to this level of thing or these kinds of engagements. And it's like always scary. I've not found that it stops being scary, but it always works out. But yeah, so I feel like we have to address, there's like this Chekhov's gun elephant in the room as we've gone down this very beautiful filmmaking business tangent, which I've really enjoyed. But where does the you being a chef thing come into any of this?
Yeah, so just in general, I think like we could have so many careers and jobs, and we are in the gig economy, the hustle era. Like you can be doing a bunch of different things, right? So I ended up getting into film production, and then I fell in love with food. My dad owns an Italian sausage factory. I grew up around food. I thought I was going to be in food before I thought I was going to be in actuarial insurance calculations of statistics for insurance companies, right? So I always had a passion for food. So as soon as I started to get into videography, one of my first big clients was a food company, a food product company. They make air fryers, waffle makers, blenders. And that business, they were one of the clients where I charged them nothing to start, and they became a huge client. So over the course of like 3 or 4 years, I became an expert in food videography and production. I absolutely fell in love with it. And then during that process, I also started to become more conscious and aware of the effects that the food we eat has on our body and the environment, and just to have more intentionality with the food that I was eating. And I came across a few documentaries about the food industry that just rubbed me the wrong way. It was Forks Over Knives was a big one. Mm-hmm. And it talks all about where your food comes from. It's a vegan, plant-based documentary, but let's go on the level of everyone. Like just take a bite and think about, the farm that grew that food, the truck that brought it to the store, the person who stocked it, all the way to that food getting to your plate. It just creates a new relationship that you can have with your food. And through that process, I was working with this kitchen appliance company making videos, and they wanted the most deep fried, artery clogging food videos you could ever imagine, because that's what went viral and that's what people want to see. Give them the fast food content, right?
Is this back, like, when is this? Is this Epic Mealtime era, or is this more recent?
So I didn't know Epic Mealtime, but I do now. Similar time. It was like when Tasty videos first became popular. Top-down production videos. So I saw my first Tasty video, and I started working with this client, and I was like, oh, we can do this for you. So we just started mass producing Tasty-style videos for a kitchen appliance company, which made a lot of sense. It was a big client too, because they had every month they released a new size, color SKU of their air fryer or their blender, or their waffle maker. And with every product, they wanted 10 recipe videos, top down like tasty videos. And they also wanted 3 videos in the kitchen with the chef that was working for them. So they were a big client. We were doing tons of work for them. It was right around that time when like Facebook food videos were becoming popular. This is before Instagram, I think, even had the video function, let alone the Reels, and let alone the impact it's had today. So we were doing all that stuff, and I was making deep fried cheeseburger, burrito, donut, waffle, cone ice creams, right? And I was watching a documentary about how unhealthy food can cause illness and disease. And through that, I had this huge split, and I decided to fire my client because I couldn't stand making that content. It just felt like it felt morally wrong to make that content. So I fired my client, and then I pursued this mission to learn as much as I can about the food industry and food space. And I had this background in video production, and I had this urge and desire and passion to learn about food. And similarly, I had just read a book called The Third Door by a friend who's one of our mutual friends, Alex Benayan, today. And in that book, he talks about how he went on this mission to learn how the top 10 people at their industries became experts in their industry. And he made this list, put it on the wall, and it was a list of all these people that I would want to learn from. And he had like crazy Oprah, Bill Gates, Lady Gaga, and eventually interviewed some of these people in the book. And he was a friend because I filmed some of his speeches. And now we have a much bigger story going on today. But I read that book right around the time when I was learning about food. And what I do is I create a list. Who are the top 10 doctors and food experts and documentary filmmakers that I would want to learn from? And I created this list, and I thought, what would I want to do with them if I had the chance? And I thought, well, I know how to make cooking content. I know how to make cooking shows because I was doing long form with the chef. So I was like, I would want to have a cooking show where I invite them to cook together. And I basically just ask them questions and literally just pick their brains and learn as much as I can from these experts. So I created this concept, and then I had a good background in production. So I created a pilot episode for the show. I pitched it, and eventually it got picked up. And fast forward, I had the number one person on my list teaching me about cancer fighting food. And it was just like an incredible experience. And then I took that, and then I pursued a mission to learn how to actually make that type of food. And then I became a chef, and then I did private events and catering. And eventually that's where it went from film to food production to my own cooking show to catering business to where I'm at today, which is where I still do like a little bit of everything.
Dude, that's magic. That's so cool.
It was manic.
I mean, I just love that reality of like following your curiosity and using the skills you have to continue to open doors and things that you want to learn about and ways that you want to serve. I won't get into all the details, but it's like, that's been so similar in my life. You know, it's like coming to those layers of like, I'm kind of sick of feeling like we're manipulating people into buying stuff they don't actually want or need all the time. Like, let's take a pivot off of that. How do we, I'm sick of seeing creative contractors get abused. Like, how do we build a system that's better for that? And, it's like, in some ways I did, but in some ways I didn't ever see myself doing what I do now. And I'm at a point now where like explaining what I do is harder than ever. Like, I'm curious, what do you tell people you do now?
It's weird. I think about this a lot. It kind of depends on the person because it's hard to explain all of it at once. And I think it's easier if like I'm talking to somebody, and if we're talking about food, I'll talk about the food stuff. If we're talking about film, I'll talk about film stuff. If they're a random person that I meet on the street, I'll say, I make videos that try and teach people to eat healthier. And I sometimes make videos that talk about interesting stories and businesses that are trying to make a positive impact on people's lives. So that's kind of like my umbrella. But if I'm talking to a foodie, I will get kind of into the trenches of making cooking videos for social media. And I have like a TikTok page where I teach people vegan recipes, and I'll kind of get into the threads with it. So it kind of depends.
So with your journey through helping people with tuition, getting into video production and filmmaking, then becoming a chef and hosting things. Like, as you look from now towards the future, what does success look like for you?
I think success for the future for me is, I spent 10 years trying to figure out what I wanted to do and do something that felt good doing it, and figuring out how to make enough money to just keep doing it. Success for the next 10 years is enjoying that as much as humanly possible and doing it with people that I've met along the way and love. And I feel like I'm just getting to a point where I'm really starting to do that. I just went on a trip to talk about how a town that used to kill whales for food is now trying to save whales. And I got to dive in the ocean and witness ocean at its most raw form and had the craziest experience of my life. And that's because of all the things that I worked hard to do to get to this point, because I'm carrying a camera during that and I'm making it a collaboration, right? And that's my job. So I want to be able to make decisions to do those things and enjoy them and invite people that I love along with that while telling a meaningful story in the process. So it's not as crazy ambitious as it used to be. It used to be, I got to do this and hit these marks and set this goal list. Now it's like, I hit some goals. Now let me just soak in it, you know?
That's it for this week's episode of Second Order Change. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Mario for taking the time to come on and share. I would love to have him back on because I feel like we didn't even really get into what's going on currently in his world, because his business is fascinating, right? Like, he's talent and creative director and DP and working with these incredible brands, and there's a whole world of brand deals that I would love to get his insights on. So if you're interested in that, leave a comment, send me a DM, let me know, because I would love to have Mario back. And if you don't care, don't say anything. Maybe just leave a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. Share the episode with a friend. You know, that stuff all really does make a big difference. And I'm excited because next week we have our last episode before Christmas, and we are going to be talking to the incredible Jeremy Dorn. You don't know him. You don't love him because he's a behind the scenes guy. He is my accountant. He is a relationship manager at Core Group. And we really dig into the nitty gritty of finances, accounting, his journey with running and the mental breakdown and crisis that led him to get into running. We talk about Section 179 write-offs. We talk about payroll, the decision to expense things, common mistakes that he sees. And I'm so grateful for Jeremy. He's been one of the greatest weapons I have found in joining Core. So there's the actual just like task orientation side of it where Sabrina handles my bookkeeping and I don't have to look at those transactions. And Alicia handles payroll and I don't have to think about it. And Jeremy's handling all these other things. But one of the biggest things is that I can call Jeremy anytime and just ask him questions. And like when I was buying the new car, I called Jeremy and I was like, hey, explain to me, like a lot of people talk about this whole Section 179 thing with cars and 6,000 pounds and how would that fit into my financial picture? And we had a conversation about it. And when I first hired Jeremy, when we first started working with Core, I spent probably 2 months just asking him like every dumb question that I felt bad about asking before that, where I was like, how does payroll actually work? What if I can't make payroll? What if I make more money than that? What if, how do I write off food? What can't I write off here? And he has done such a good job of just educating me and taking charge of so many things and agency, and he really is the lifeblood of the magic that Core has infused into my business. And so I'm personally so grateful for Jeremy and grateful for this conversation because we just get into it and we break down some of my stuff, which I'm happy to be an open book about. But I'm really excited for you to hear more from Jeremy next week on Second Order Change.
Full year's worth of monthly retainer fees for what he was doing for them. All in one lump sum. And I was like, wow, really? That's awesome. Like for cash flow, that's great. And he was so excited. I said, how'd you get him to do that? And he said, well, I gave him a 30% discount. And I said, 30% discount? And I'm looking at the guy's books because we're going over books because it's our quarterly meeting. And his profit margin was 30%. And I said, well, why did you do that? He said, well, I'm still taking home 70% of it. And I was like, Yeah, but your profit margin for your business is 30%. You literally just gave away all of the profit so that you could get that cash early.
There are strategic, actionable decisions, and those things compound on each other, but there's not a lot of free lunches. And I feel like there's a lot of people playing this game that is like, what you don't know is here's how to, get $100,000 free. And it's like, that's not how any of this is designed to work, really.
So next time you want tax advice, call your tax advisor. Right?
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
take it from the guy sitting next to you at the casino. Like, that guy doesn't know your situation. That guy doesn't know anything about you.